two amazing people, Amy and Josh, and they're going to tell us a little bit of the story about discovering and expanding family. So, Josh and Amy, thanks for being here.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
I think that Josh should start. I think
agree.
it's right. I think it's his family. So, Josh, tell us a little bit about expanding and reopening, and I guess redefining the ideas of family and life that you've been doing the past few years now.
Okay. Well, it's been a pretty wild ride. I'll say that to start with. So I'll give you like the maybe the basic overview of how it all came about, and then kind of where we're going now. So like I think it was 2017-ish. My wife bought me a ancestry DNA kit, and then I think that was a pretty popular new thing at the time. So it took quite a while for results to come in. So so that was cool because I was always been like interested in heritage and things like that, and that's just something that interested me. I didn't ask for it. She surprised me with it. It was kind of cool. So a couple of months later, it was like April timeframe. By the time we got results back and whatnot, I get an email, open it up, and so my last name's Weaver. I understood the heritage to be German and whatnot. So I'd actually traced my name out back to on the ancestry thing, and then I get the thing, and it says here's your DNA analysis or whatever, and so I see I don't see German, and I say, okay, that's the first question, what's going on? And then that also links you to people, like, hey, this person's your first cousin, this person, based on with this other people that are in the database. And so it was there was some close relations, second cousins, that I'm like, I don't even know these names. So contacted, interesting, my mom contacted me that same day, and she said, hey, did you ever get those results back? I'm like, funny enough, I did. She said, okay, well, let's get together this week and talk about it. And so then with the relations that were matched on the DNA kit or thing, my wife is she's very talented at social media, and so she was able to find some names and find people and find things. So kind of saw that there was like a relation to the area that we live in now. I'm like, okay, this is cool. So I kind of like had an idea of like a family tree traced out. And then she came over and then basically revealed to me, hey, this happened years ago. She wasn't sure, and so she gave me my dad Henry's name. So probably as we talk, I'll mention, I'll just say this, I'll say like my dad Buck or my dad Henry, just for clarification if we get into anything like that. So my dad Henry is my biological father, and so so it was like immediately right away understood, because we had the tree traced out. So so that was, I'll say, obviously it was a surprise, but it was cool it was okay, because I kind of recognized, I'm an adult, and receiving this information as an adult. So it was that was an okay thing. I understood her position. She was really young. She was 20. And there was certainly some fear factors then, and there's not a confirmation of any sort. So so it was like, okay, that's the deal. And then, all right, so then I had to decide, like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with this information, right? There's a whole, there's folks out there that aren't aware. And so then there was some lamenting back and forth of like, okay, what do I do? Because this could, recognize trying to be sensitive to other people, who drop a bomb on somebody, or ruin somebody's life potentially by, by saying, hey, this happened, what happened back almost 40 years ago, but it still matters. So long story short, I guess, eventually decided that, you know, I know two reasons I would want to know. And I have two sons, so I wanted to know, you know, okay, that was my only expectations initially were, let's talk about, you know, is there anything I need to know, like, you know, from a medical perspective, and I would just want to know. But what happened was not what I was expecting, and much greater than I had anticipated. Eventually, you know, once we finally got to hook up and start talking, the reception was immediate, mind-blowingly immediate, welcome to the family type of reception that my wife was trying to prepare me for, but I was like, yeah, right, no, come on. And really exceptional. And our first meeting, Amy was there, and she served as I don't know. I'm so glad you were there.
Me too. Who knows what would happen? So for clarification, right? So Henry is also my dad. So Josh's bio dad, Henry, is my bio dad too. And you know, the bio dad sounds like a really cold way to put it. He's my dad.
Great.
So
And
one
your dad you were raised your whole life with, you know.
Yeah, my whole life.
Yeah,
I
that was your
mean,
dad, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, on my end, so there's two other siblings, right? Josh and I have a brother, Johnny, and a sister, Cassie, too, who are the siblings that I was raised with, that are from my parents. So they're in my family of origin. And so my Josh had messaged my dad, or you had messaged, or our dad. See, this is a thing that I'm still getting used to.
Right.
Just the language of it all. Uh, you had messaged dad's cousin, who then reached out to dad, I think.
I messaged him first. We found him on Facebook, but there was like, you could tell he didn't even see the message.
Yeah,
right.
Doesn't know how to use Facebook.
Right.
Henry was not
So-
hanging out on the book. Okay, yeah.
Right. Yeah. That was so my, yeah, our first goal was to message him first. And then we gave it. And even in that message, I said, you know, if I don't hear from you or you don't see this, whatever, I'll try other aspects. And so, yeah, so I reached out to another contact that I saw on Ancestry.
Right. And I don't remember who it is or anything. I probably don't know them that well, but, and then dad told Johnny, well, he told my mom, Lynn, and then he then told Johnny. And so then that same day, Johnny came over to my house and said, like, if I knew something about dad that was dad's secret to tell you, but I already knew it, would you want me to tell you? And I said, abso-fucking-lutely.
Of course. Who says no to that?
And just the dynamics of our family, I'm like really used to everyone telling me anything anyway. I'm very middle child, middle of everything. So then Johnny said, you know, dad has another son. And we looked at Josh's Facebook, and then, you know, we were like, holy shit, like you guys look so much alike. Johnny and Josh look so much alike. And then Josh looks so much like dad. I mean, like, even though we didn't do like a paternity test proper, there's, I don't think, any denying it.
No. like identical. Like
yes.
Yes. I have known Henry since I was 14 years old, and yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know what's sort of interesting. So Josh, you sort of said, you know, your wife was the one who's like, oh, you could have this whole other family, and you didn't think that was going to happen. You had it in your head that this was going to be logistical and
right.
clinical in some way. You didn't think that it would involve. Can I ask you about that?
I don't know if it was part of me managing my own expectations, right? You know, like certainly once my mom, you know, told me his name, and like we looked, and like, okay, like she's like, you have siblings. Oh, you know, like I grew up an only child, right? And so, and like it's something like I always wanted siblings, interestingly. And so, but I was, you know, definitely trying to manage my own expectations there, like, hey, listen, I had to, realistically prepare, like, for someone to say, hey, buzz off, pal, thanks for the info, but that's just the way it is. And I would understand that. I wouldn't have been upset. And so that's why I kind of went in and said, all right, what's the minimum amount of data that I think any reasonable person would give me, and that I feel that I need regardless. And that's that's for, I have my family, my sons and whatnot, and I need to know. And if there's anything that I need to know about, I think any reasonable person, whether they were interested in a relationship or not, I would hope they would at least be willing to give that up. So whether I really wanted something more or not, it's hard to say at this point. I probably did, but wouldn't allow myself to go there.
Like the fear of the disappointment.
Yeah.
I kept you from, right?
Right. Yeah.
Which makes a lot of sense. As you're saying, I think that so often it doesn't turn out in this way where like there's such a connection.
Okay, so Amy, you get this information from Johnny.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, I never has, right? Amy's personality is like, you like, I mean, Josh, you probably speak to this. Amy's love, like Amy's aura is surrounded with love. She's like, oh, I want family, I want people, and I'm gonna like welcome. I would imagine, knowing you for as long as I have, Amy, you probably were the same way in this situation.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm in.
Yeah, which is like, I mean, Josh had spoke to like the first time we met. And so when I found out this information, I had just had my first child, my son. So I had a newborn, and eventually, like, the way it transpired is Johnny told me, but I wasn't allowed to tell anyone that I knew. So then, maybe a week later, Johnny's at my house, and our sister Cassie calls Johnny and says, I have this information that I know that you now have too, because Dad told me. And Johnny's like, oh, I'm with Amy. And she's like, oh shit, is she allowed to know? And he's like, I already told her. So then like there's this whole like whisper down the lane thing that happens of like, this person knows, but they're not allowed to know. I knew, but I couldn't say anything to anybody. Then eventually, like, it was all convoluted. So then eventually, like, I think like a month passed maybe, and my dad still hadn't said anything to me. So I said to him, okay, so I know what's going on, right? Like, what's the deal? And I think soon after he had reached back out, because there was a period of time, Josh, where you had reached out to him and he didn't respond for a little.
I sent him the initial contact in April, like right after I found out, and then found out enough that because one thing I was concerned about, I said earlier, it was like, destroying somebody's life. So I had some, couple of candid conversations with my mom to find out, like, hey, because I knew he was married. Like, was he married at the time? And he wasn't. He wasn't. So I'm like, okay, so like that's like, that might have played a different role. I might have done things a little bit differently. I don't know. But like, okay, I don't think that's gonna, destroy any lives. Let's go and reach out. So I reached out like almost as soon as I had that information, like April, and I think it was July that I got my first contact back. So I don't know how long it was from April till like, okay, there's nothing, maybe a couple of weeks before I sent something to the cousins in Ancestry.
Mm-hmm.
But it was July when I got my first contact back. It was Josh Weaver, I don't do Facebook. Email me at this at this message. Okay.
That was your
Yeah. Yeah.
That was your first correspondence with your biological father.
Yeah.
That is the most Henry thing I've heard in my entire life.
I know.
It's pretty awesome.
It's so funny because he had like, I feel like Dad has like this like outer shell, but then once you get to know him, he's just like all mush and gush and love, right? But he definitely leads with that like harder part of himself. So it's so interesting. I never thought of it that way, that was your first contact.
It felt like, okay, legitimate, like, okay, I don't know this, because I was like, he addressed me like my full name. So like I bought it, it didn't seem cold, it seemed mechanical,
Okay.
Yeah.
So can I ask a little bit about, so then at some point this decision is made to meet in person. I'm assuming there was maybe phone calls before that. You had some type
Yeah,
of conversation with Henry. Can I hear a little bit about that first meeting and that decision?
sure.
Because that's a big thing. It's saying like I'm gonna, right? Like it's sort of this large step that I would imagine a lot of thought and consideration went into.
Yeah. So at first it's kind of like any online dating relationship, right? It starts with like just the texts, and then like the phone calls, and then meeting in person. Uh, so initially, so he gave me the email address, and I emailed him, kind of with a little bit additional information, almost the same, um, probably almost the same information that I had given. In my initial contact, I'm an engineer by trade, so I laid everything out technically, very, kind of almost like a report. Like I found this, I linked this to this, blah blah blah, like the whole story. And based on my evidence, I've reached the conclusion I believe I'm your biological son, right? That's just how I operated that first contact. So yeah, so we emailed back and forth, and then we're like, okay, let's have a conversation. So we had to have a conversation. I remember I was driving, I was working in downtown Pittsburgh, and like, all right, we're talking today, uh, you know, on my commute home. And so it was cool, awesome from the very get-go. I remember like being nervous kind of in the truck driving home, and like, okay, the phone call's coming, and it comes, and like, to hear his voice for the first time was pretty wild, right? And like, I remember like bits and pieces of the conversation, and even where I was driving. I don't know, there's some vivid memories from that, because I had and honestly, this speaks, to him, uh, volumes, like, because I had offered like, hey, listen, like, I know that this is weird, I'm a adult too, and if someone would come to me, like, okay, I could have some questions or some suspicions or whatever. And I offered like, hey, if you wanted to do like a proper paternity test or whatever, like, I'm okay with that. I'll do whatever you want. It's up to you. And he like just dismissed it, and he was like, no. He was like, from the get-go, our very first conversation, he said, no. He said, I see the evidence, I see what's going on. He said, and I recognize you as my son. And I'm like, holy crap. He actually used that word in our very first conversation, which caught me off guard, to be honest, but it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, like I'm feeling
Yeah.
as you're telling the story, I'm feeling emotional. And
Yeah.
so I'm just wondering what that was like for you, to really, because that, I think it's just such a brave thing to do, to go into this so open, and because there's so many things along the way that like kind of leave you very vulnerable. And so I'm wondering what that was like for you to hear that from him.
I mean, yeah, it was a surprise first, because I mean, things were moving, like we had just like, our first conversation, right? And it was, and I was still processing things, although I had longer time probably to figure out, you know but I didn't really fully understand or have an idea of like where the relationship was going. um and so I was the situation I was in when we even started this was, my dad, I'll say my dad Buck, who raised me, right? He had passed away in 2015. So I was kind of, you know, part of that was, you know, I don't know if there certainly was some like, okay, felt like a trespass against him in a certain way, right? And I had to come to maybe my own okay understanding that, like, okay, because I mean, from that very first conversation, it was like familial, right? Like, you're part of the family. And so after that, I started to think like, okay, like, this is real, becoming part of another family. Is that a trespass? Is that, you know I didn't want to dishonor anybody in any way, and also not offend. And I'm looking forward to this new relationship that's coming. So it was like a balance of things. Eventually, I got to the point where I realized that you can have you can have two dads. That's okay, right? And it doesn't diminish anything that my dad Buck had done in our relationship. It doesn't lessen anything there, and it's just another opportunity for growth. But it took me a little while to come to that position. I think just to be comfortable with the growth. Now, regarding our first meeting and whatnot, actually in person, we had my dad Henry and I had a plan. We had talked back and forth. We're like, we're going to take this slow. He and I were going to meet, have a sandwich together, and just him and I, right? And then we had a couple.
What's the most Henry thing ever?
Right.
Sandwich.
That was the plan. And then it just so happened that was it Labor Day was coming up
on
and
Bridget.
yeah, and you guys were coming to visit grandma. So he's like, well, timeline isn't going to be exactly how we want it to be. Are you okay with that? We're going to be there in person like next week. I'm like, well, okay. So let's do it. And then we had a meeting at a restaurant that's kind of nearby, and everybody
geographically speaking, we live in
yeah.
Philadelphia area. Like I do, and then Henry and my mom Lynn, Josh and his family live in Western PA. So it's a bit of a drive, but both of our parents are from our dad. See, I just really cannot get that right.
Yeah.
The parents are from Western PA, and our dad's mom, Cecilia, who's still alive, God bless her. She's like 103 now.
A champion.
A champion, still cooking, an absolute phenomenon. So we were coming out to visit her, and it was Lynn, my mom, Henry, our dad, and me and my then very young baby Miles. So we were all coming out. And so we had, I guess, Henry and Josh had organized this
sandwich meeting.
The sandwich meeting, yeah.
Being meatballs, but yeah.
So it didn't just end up being you and Henry, right? Was it everyone at first?
No, yeah, that was So that was the
I see.
initial plan. But once everybody was coming this way, we said, all right, let's do it. So my wife Chandra and I, and so we decided, our boys, well, I guess, how old were they then? 4 and 6, I guess. So we kind of said, all right, this first meeting, we're going to keep them home, and we didn't inform them of anything, because just we wanted the ability to also talk, get to know each other. So my wife Chandra and I went over, and we kind of set the restaurant up, and went there, and that's it. Got our first picture together. It actually comes up on our little digital frame every now and then. It's pretty cool.
Yes, when we got there, it was kind of weird at first, right? Because
Sure.
you're like, what do we talk about? I mean, we have so much in common, and yet we don't know each other at all.
Right.
But eventually, I mean, I feel like I guess this is just like my personality. I was like I got comfortable right away, and we were like talking about like, I think Lynn or Henry were like, when are we gonna, what's the plan moving forward? And I was like, you guys should come to Thanksgiving.
Right. Immediately. Yeah. It was like first conversation, like, whoa, okay. Right.
We're doing holidays together now, right?
So Josh is going in like, okay, like I'm just gonna see where this goes. And Amy's like, I got a brother and I'm gonna fucking love this guy. And like, I'm in, right? Like,
you're coming to the next thing.
Yes, you were like, Amy is like, you were fully in, man.
Yeah, I was fully in. I mean, Johnny and I, when Johnny told me, we were like, this is great, we're in. And we basically, Johnny and I had decided together that day that he came over and told me, like, regardless of what Henry decides to do, we're going to pursue a relationship with Josh. Like, that's our sibling. We're bringing him into the fold.
Wow.
It's like, I think I said this, Josh and I were talking on the phone about something else the other day, and I said, like, I don't want to make you feel trapped, but you're trapped now. I know where you live.
Yeah, so but tell us about that. Like, how has your relationship unfolded since that time? What does that look like?
Pretty quickly, I think. It's so weird because I don't even have a word for it, because just finding out that I had this other brother, he just immediately felt like a brother. Like, I like, even when we first met, I was like, wow, like, I love him. I mean, I love his family. Like, meeting his kids, meeting his wife, like, it was just like, oh, these are my people now. I'm gonna get emotional talking about it because it just was immediate. It's so crazy. Like, and I'm sure, this happens a lot, and I'm sure it's not everyone's experience, but they were just family right away.
Yeah, that's something we talk about. Um, is how it was. It did feel immediate. It really did. Um, it was kind of like, all right, let's go.
Yeah. It's like, I don't really believe in like the soulmate thing, but there is like some sort of like string that connects our hearts or something, just like from like being related. I don't know. I can't, I like, I don't think it has a name, but it's just like, it's there.
There was a
And
comfort,
yeah.
right? There wasn't like literally maybe for the first minute there was the uncomfortability of like, what do we like wow, this is happening, it's real, and this is like, I've never met anybody before, but that was gone within the first like minute, and it's been comfort.
Yeah.
Have you discovered like similarities that the two of you have, or that you have, is there anything that comes up? Because I'm just hearing that there's this immediate connection that you have. Yeah, like what does that look like for the two of you?
It's harder for me to identify similarities between Josh and I, but I can definitely see the similarities between Josh and Henry. Like, not just in looks, but in personality. The way, even Josh, the way you were talking about how you laid out that initial email of like, here are the facts. This is like, this led me to this led me to this. And just like very logical, and just like the way that you process things is so much how dad processes them too. Like, just like, this is the information, and then like maybe the emotional aspect of it kind of like comes in a little bit later. Like, you feel
Right.
it, but like your initial processing of a situation is like, give me the facts, give me the logic, give me the info. And I see that as like a similarity between you and dad. I feel like there's so many similarities between you and dad.
Sure, yeah, I was just speaking with him last night, and we were comparing our, well, I called it stubbornness, B corrected me, and he rephrased it as determination in our personalities, and I like that better. So I think I have someone to blame, like when I drive Chandler crazy, my wife Chandler crazy. Hey, it's biology, I can't help it. It's
That determination.
Right.
Josh, you talked a little bit about the complexity of from a young age, we're told we have, for many of us, we have two parents, right? And then things happen, and sometimes you don't have two parents anymore, whether that's from divorce, whether it's from someone passing, some loss, right? More people come into our lives. You talked a little bit about maybe some of the complexity that you had to move through with the losing of your father, Buck, and then the gaining of your father, Henry. Did it change at all? I mean, I think you're right that like this happened to you at a time in your life, like you weren't 15. If you're a 15-year-old boy and you get this news, I think it's easier to be upset with your mom.
Sure.
Right? Like, I think the age where we discover information does change things for us. What was that like then, navigating the relationship with your mom? And was it difficult for her in any way? Because all of a sudden you now have this additional family, right? I'm wondering if you'd be willing to speak to that at all. Because I
Sure.
think for a lot of people that can feel like, oh, I'm betraying my mom, right? There's like this feeling of like I'm unconsciously hurting somebody, or I'm breaking the rules in some way.
Sure. So from her perspective, this was like the night that she told me, she said, listen, this is something that I've never told anybody. She had kept this as a and she wasn't 100% sure, right? So, and I understand, right? It was the early 80s, and and like whatever.
Who knows what was happening in those times? A lot of unprotected sex, apparently.
Right.
Yeah. For everyone, I think.
Right.
It's good. It's good for the ancestry.com business.
Yes.
But so like she hadn't this. It felt like a relief, and I think for her, right? Because she had been hoarding this, or not hoarding, but like keeping this secret that that she hadn't shared with anybody, right? And so I'm sure that had to be a relief for her. And I recognized right away, like like she was concerned, that like, and I probably just because people you get into your own head, but she was concerned that like my reaction would be poor, and I would be upset and want to it would really affect our relationship. But that probably wasn't, that was just more her anxiety coming in rather than I mean, she knows my personality. That's not how I would handle it. And and I recognize that as a 20-year-old, of course she did what she did. But then there was immediate like she was happy for me, right? She was relieved to have this known to me finally, or at least the confirmation, and she was happy to see me pursue these additional familial relationships. And so she was supportive the whole time, right? And she kind of gave me permission. I don't know if I would have required it, but she gave me permission to like she said, this is your story, tell it, it's okay, right? And that was that's kind of, it was comforting to know that from her perspective, because like I try to be sensitive to that too, because I understand what she had to deal with. And that was actually some of the reactions when I started to first tell people. Some of the first reactions that I got from people weren't like, oh, well, that had to be hard for you. They were, oh man, that had to be so hard for your mom, right? And that caught me off guard, and it actually made me had to start thinking about that, and kind of more from her perspective too. And I, okay, I recognize that actually is the case. But no, that was it was support probably all the way there. It's every step of this seems to be like, if there's two ways that things could go, it's gone the positive way. And I know that's unfortunately not the case in so many relationships, but I think we've been very fortunate in basically all of them.
Definitely. I definitely agree with that.
It sounds that way, right? Like even here, I mean, this is maybe the most emotional I have felt on a podcast.
Yeah, we're
It's
both
like,
crying.
But truly, like it really sounds like you have developed all of these really strong, special relationships that you haven't had before, and that it has all come with such support and love.
I think the thing that's striking for me as you both talk about this, which is you've probably, I imagine you've talked about this in some ways, but like it's sort of different. You know what I mean? I wonder what it's even like for you
Like,
guys
has
right
anyone
now
ever
doing this.
interviewed you
Yeah,
about
right.
your
Like it's
relationship
interesting
before?
to talk about it in this sense, and I would like to know what's coming up for you in that. But I think the thing that's really catching for me is we're talking about deliberate choice, right? Amy talking and sitting with Johnny and saying, I don't really care whatever Henry does, but like Josh is my brother, like that, like there's something so significant, I think, is choking me up about like the intentionality and the consciousness of like, I am making a choice that this is family too. Like biology aside, like I don't need the official documents. Like this is a choice. This is my brother. We are making these relationships happen. And I think that is what it's bringing up a lot of emotions for me.
Yeah. And I think that that's part of the thing that's so different about this relationship and how we entered into it later when we were all adults, is that there were a lot of choices to be made. And I think that's the thing that stands out to me too, is that like we've chosen to be family out the gate. Right. And I mean, it's not just Josh too. Like I also got a sister-in-law, which I didn't have before, and I got two nephews, which like I'll cry just talking about them. But I'm probably going to right now. But like Johnny and Cassie, our other siblings, don't have children. Um, and so to get nephews has been like the most amazing thing. And like now my kids have cousins, like they all have each other. And one of the things that I think about the most, I think, um, when I think about how Josh came into our lives is that like my kids will never not know.
Right.
I was like, I'm not gonna cry. And here I
No, we're all gonna cry.
am. I know.
Josh,
My kids will never not know. I mean, my daughter was born after Josh was already in the family, so she will never have lived any part of her life without him and without her cousins and without her aunt. And I just think there's something so beautiful about that.
It's really cool. Yeah, and our kids, you know, they're young enough now where like that was a concern. Like, how are they gonna deal with this? But it like kids are funny. They're like immediately like, okay, this is what's going on,
They
right?
were like, they
And
have a bay house.
right.
Like, yeah. Well, so how did you explain it to the kids? Can I ask that? Like, what was what did you and your wife decide of like, because they were pretty young, but they still all of a sudden there's other people in their lives. How did you broach that together?
So we were kind of like okay, we're gonna let them lead a little bit. Lead a little bit there, but introduce them as we actually had the conversation ahead of time. This is Pap and Gigi. Like, what do you want to be called? Like, how do you want to be introduced, right? And so we had a weekend. They invited us out to their home. So we go out there and like I think that was their first meeting with the kids, because like when we first met here in Western Pennsylvania, it was just at a restaurant. We excluded the kids from it. So our first meeting, or rather, Johnny was there, and it was like it was the same as all this story. Immediate, you know. We went to like get a pizza or something, and then we come back in, and Johnny says, "Okay, I'm ready to be called Uncle Johnny," right? Like that was it, right? And like they were just like introduced as like this, Pap and Gigi. This is them, and they're like, okay, these are Pap and Gigi. These are my additional grandparents, and these are your aunts and uncles, and so like it wasn't weird for them because they didn't know. Maybe they typically don't just get introduced to them when you're 4 or 6, right? They're just like, okay, this is just the way it is, and so it's great, and looking back, they're probably never going to remember a time where this isn't the case, which is also pretty awesome.
Yeah. I also want to give a shout out to my mom.
Oh my goodness.
Would any of this be happening in this way if it weren't for her? I mean, she also made a very conscious choice.
Wait, let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about when Henry found out, Lynn found out.
Yes.
So will you speak to that a little bit, Amy? Like, because you watched your mom discover, for a lot of people, that would be like, how does this affect my marriage? Shocking. And like, that wasn't Lynn at all.
No, she immediately was like, this is so fucking cool. Like, and she was like, wow, Henry, I think it took Henry longer to wrap his brain around it and to like really be like, okay, I'm like going in, right? This is what we're doing. My mom was like also immediate. Like she was just like, this is so cool. When are you going to meet him? When are you going to call him? Like she wanted to, and she was in it. I mean, at the restaurant, the first time we met, she's coming with questions. She wants to know all about you guys. And that's her personality too. She's a very curious person. So, she wanted to get all of the information. She had done her own Facebook stalking. Like, I mean, I think that's such a funny part of it. Is like we all kind of like saw each other on Facebook and we're like, okay, like this is what they're into, right? But she orchestrates so much of it too. And I mean, like she really embraced everybody right away. And, you know, when she said it to me the other night, she said, uh, we have 4 kids. Like it's not Henry's son, Josh. It's we have 4 kids, right? We have 4 grandchildren, right? My daughter-in-law, Chandra. Like it's just like she was a huge part of it too. I mean, I think everyone was making this intentional choice for it to be family the whole way. And I think without Lynn, things probably would have moved a lot slower. But she was like,
Hands down.
yeah, she was like, no,
100%. I mean,
we're
we've said
going.
that. Yes. I mean, she had the power to really, like, really, stop the process, really, or really, impede everything. And she's been so awesome in all of it. And it's definitely because of that conscious choice that, I mean, that's like almost like the first domino to make everything fall into place, because it's incredible, actually. And I think we owe her a lot to,
Yeah,
to where we are.
yeah, agreed.
Okay, we typically do calling bullshit. I
Are
don't know
we
where
doing
to go.
that
I don't know. I
today?
don't know where to go with this episode. I'm gonna be honest, because I want to name the title "When a Simple Gift Changes Your Life," right? Like the thing is that like this
Good,
was
that's a good
not
one.
when you were given a simple ancestry DNA kit for fun, for funsies.
Right.
Right. Oh, we'll just see a little bit about like what region exactly I'm from. And I think the interesting story is that like your story is more and more common every day that we hear about, that a simple gift somebody gives for funsies changes everything. And you're right, not every story looks as beautiful and picturesque as yours does. And I'm sure there was lots of, complex feelings around it all, deeper than we can get to in a podcast episode. But sometimes a simple act changes your entire world.
If I'm sorry.
No, I want to hear what you have to
I
say.
was gonna say, if 23andMe doesn't sponsor us for this, then they're making a mistake.
Was it 23andMe or Ancestry?
Oh, which one was it?
It was Ancestry, right?
I used Ancestry DNA,
Ancestry,
right?
Ancestry
Yeah.
DNA.
Ancestry
Now you
does
can
not-
don't forget to sponsor this episode. But Josh is now the poster child. I'm sure he does not want that at all.
No, definitely not.
But so typically I would ask you guys to do calling bullshit. I would like to change that, although I'm sorry if you prepped for that. I'm wondering if instead we were calling bullshit, could you both speak to if there's somebody else with family transforming? If there's something else, what would you want someone else who is in the beginning of this to know? What would you want to say to somebody who is maybe where you were a few years ago?
You want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I think even though our story is beautiful and overall very positive, there is a lot of complexity, like you said. And something that Josh and I have talked about recently is like this idea of finding out like how strong our relationship is, right? Because it's new and we haven't tested the bonds of it so much. There hasn't been like a huge conflict or anything. So like the question of like, is our relationship fragile? So even though our story is beautiful and all of that, I think there's still a lot of complexity and still a lot of difficulty. So I would say to anybody going through it, like it's normal for it to be difficult. It's even if it's positive, it's normal to have challenges that are associated with that. And if you can't find the positive, that's okay too. And I think ultimately, family isn't defined by DNA. In this case, it just so happens to be. That's what connected us initially. But there was so much more than that. Yeah, I think that's it. Like it's normal for it to be hard. And your family is who you choose it to be.
Josh.
Yeah. So I'm thinking more also for somebody that might be faced with the questions, like, hey, that I might be in this situation, but I'm afraid to find out, or I'm afraid of the reaction or response from others. Now, obviously, we have a really positive experience, but I mean, I haven't met, everybody that has had the same amount of positivity, but there's been both at both ends of the spectrum. Some that's kind of like, we don't care, or like, yeah, similar to our story. I would say it's worth it, for yourself, if you need to know, or somebody else might know. You're not going to know how somebody's going to react, and it's okay. There's nothing to lose, by pursuing it, and finding out, looking for the answers, and then contact. It's a scary place, but could have a huge blessing in the end.
We cannot thank you enough for coming on and telling your story in your way on today's episode of Shrink Chicks. If you want to work with the beautiful, shining soul that is Amy, you can be added to her wait list at the therapy group. She is a blessing. We are so lucky that she is one of our clinicians. I have known Amy since I was 14 years old, and I have loved her since I was 14 years old, and I will love her until the day we are crusty and old together.
I thought that was about to get dark.
I know, me too.
I was like, where's she going with that?
Just crusty and old, like a little white doggy. Josh, we can't thank you enough, and we are glad that you are now part of the therapy group family in every way that you come.
We
Those
also
beautiful kids
welcome
in
you
white.
into our family.
Yes.
You didn't
All
know
right.
when
You
you come
didn't
on
know,
this
but you're in
podcast.
there.
All
Now,
positive.
Another
It's all
family
positive.
now.
Family keeps expanding. I love it.
Right.
We love it. If you like today's episode, we always ask you to send it out to a friend, colleague, the random lady down the street who might enjoy it as well. We ask you to rate, review, subscribe, follow at Apple Podcast. You can watch the episode on YouTube, see sections of it on Instagram, work with our amazing clinicians at the therapy group if you are located in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, Florida, California, Delaware, and don't ever forget that to grow yourself, you gotta know yourself. We'll see y'all next week at Shrink Chicks.